Stephen Scofield is, bio's in the program. He's Director of the Financial Services, North America, and a Senior Consultant to the South Pole Group's institutional investor clients. He deserves a round of applause before he talks because he has personally offset our carbon emissions for this event. So would you join me in thanking him before we start? That does not preclude applause after he finishes either. The title in the program is wrong. He gave me a new title, which is Portfolio Decarbonization, Measuring the Climate Impact of Capital Under Management. Please welcome Stephen.
Hey everybody, good morning. Thank you so much for the gracious introduction. It's great to be here. I'd like to start by thanking Sally and Chip and Audrey and Ali and Abby and the entire AREDAY staff for putting together such an important and interesting gathering. Truly a special event at AREDAY, and for me it's always it's just great to participate in this. So I put together some brief remarks this morning based on our experiences as a company on working within the capital markets on climate change. And my hope is that what I'm about to share with you in one way or another will hold some sort of interest and relevance to the work that you're all doing, whether that be as climate scientists, whether that be as leaders of advocacy groups, perhaps policymakers, politicians, and the like. Very briefly, South Pole Group is an international carbon project finance and climate change consulting firm. Within the capital markets, we provide greenhouse gas emissions data to the worldwide institutional markets, and we're very proud because we've recently celebrated the 10-year anniversary of our company, and as part of our business and the work we do, we have documented the environmental and social impact that we have achieved over the past 10 years. So there's a lot of numbers up there. I'll just focus on one, that being the carbon emissions, the 80 million tons of carbon that we have saved through our projects and through our works with clients. And just to provide a little bit of context, 80 million cubic metric tons of carbon is the equivalent, roughly the equivalent of the national emissions of the country of Greece, or to put it in an American context, the state of South Carolina. And that's over a 10-year period. So when you figure that approximately 37 billion tons of carbon are emitted by the total planet, obviously we have quite a bit of work to do. We're proud to support AREDAY in the provision of renewable energy certificates. We're working with Chip's team, and we have a fantastic process of calculating the emissions associated with this entire gathering, from the energy of this room to the energy of the food preparation, and namely the amount of emissions associated with the travel. So we were working with Chip's staff. And more specifically, these certificates are being provided from a project that we developed outside of La Paz, the city of La Paz in Baja, California. So we're very proud to deliver carbon neutrality to this entire gathering. These are some of the characteristics of the project itself. 1 year ago today, for those of us that were here, Senator Tim Wirth did a fantastic job of telling the backstory of his participation in, I think, basically the original climate change negotiations that took place in Rio de Janeiro, and he essentially was painting the road to Paris at that time. We were 6 months away from COP21. And of course, Christiana Figueres, the lead UN climate change negotiator, was always telling those of us that were sort of involved, and pretty much anyone she would meet with, that it was never about the road to Paris. It was always going to be about the road through Paris. So here we are 1 year later and 6 months after COP21, and I think in one form or another, everybody in this room is trying to understand and perhaps analyze what the implications of COP21 will be and what they are. We know that the business and the financial community is consistently calling from the public sector for strong signals. That is what they're always all about. Give us strong signals. Well, when 190 companies come together and submit their plans, you couldn't ask for a stronger signal to the financial community than what has been delivered by COP21. So the good news is that COP21 now is officially baked into the agreement that the banking, finance, thank you, investor community will be called upon to mobilize capital in order to finance the transition to a global, to a lower carbon global economy that we so desperately need to stay within that budget. And some of the smartest people in the industry were just here on this panel. So the numbers are in, and here are some of the research organizations that have established what the amount of capital that's going to need to be mobilized to build out the sustainable infrastructure. And the numbers are truly staggering, so we've absolutely got to get going. Also, a year ago, we shared with you the infographics of the number of countries around the world and also the number of states and provinces that were implementing some form of carbon tax and or a carbon emissions trading scheme. And at that time, 1 year ago today, it was 40 countries and 24 states and provinces. Well, in looking at the INDCs that were submitted in December and are in the process of being ratified, 90 of those agreements include some implementation of carbon tax or carbon emission trading schemes and or both. So the question is, what does this mean for the financial community? What does this mean? What does it mean for these changes? It is clear to us that over a 5 to 15-year period for medium and long-term investors, the world's economies, the world's businesses, and the world's societies are going to look vastly different. So as investors, when you look at your portfolio as institutional retail investors, do your investments still make sense? Where is the risk in your portfolio? What are the investment opportunities associated with the investment opportunities to transition this along? General Wesley Clark yesterday used the expression, I'm not sure if he's still in the room, the bad news bears. I thought it was kind of a funny one. So right now, the next 2 or 3 slides are the bad news bears. Within the financial community, there's an intensifying discussion and sort of the recognition of what's coming to be known as stranded assets. And these are sort of the financial term and expression for investments within the fossil fuel economy that have the risk of being significantly stranded. And of course, it's playing out pretty quickly, and that's sort of the bad news. Obviously, it's going to hold tremendous implication for some of the petro-states of the world, like Venezuela. It's already happening. Nigeria, Ecuador, Mexico, Brazil. It could really be a very challenging time for those countries. But we know now, there's so many people in this room that are familiar with some of these information about the amount of unburnable carbon. Essentially, the 2/3 of the world's carbon fossil fuel reserves are deemed unburnable. And so what do investors do that are still invested in these companies that have those carbon reserves on their balance sheets, that have those carbon reserves, those Scope 3 emissions that are baked into their market cap and their financial valuations? Obviously, people are aware of some of the distress within the thermal coal industry. So more bad news bears. There's been 89 bankruptcy filings just in North America alone, only in the last 14 months. Okay, so this stranded asset risk is being taken very seriously by investors. We get asked by our clients on a weekly intensifying basis to help them identifying where this risk is spreading to next. Enough with the bad news bears expression from Wesley Clark. Let's move into sort of some of the positive direction. On a voluntary basis, many of the world's largest investors are taking the initiative and the initial steps to address that risk and to take action and mobilize capital in the direction of a lower carbon global economy. Our company is a big part of several of these initiatives. These might be foreign to some of you in the room. I'll point out one in particular, the United Nations Montreal Carbon Pledge, where $3 trillion worth of assets under management. And they've made the commitment to basically take a measurement of what do we own? What is the carbon footprint of our assets under management? They're measuring it and they're disclosing it. Now, of course, the next is decarbonizing your portfolio and mobilizing capital in the direction that we need it to go. But for now, that is a very, very important first step and an important trend in this industry that we see and we're also very much a big part of. So as these world's institutional investors, such as sovereign wealth funds and the world's largest pension funds, as they do this voluntarily, at the same time, they're being pushed into it by the regulators. And so we're starting to see some major action within the very top leadership. What I have on the screen here, the G20, which is obviously a grouping of the world's largest and most powerful economies. They established the Financial Stability Board 5 years ago as a response and a reaction to avoid what had happened in the global financial crisis to work on the systems. Well, they have been so compelled by the topic of climate change that they've set up a special task force, which is called the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures. And this is a worldwide group, and Michael Bloomberg has jumped into the fold. And what they're going to be doing is they're going to be issuing a set of guidelines for businesses and issuers of public equities and fixed income products to be responding to their shareholders to provide explicit information on what are the fundamental risks to their business models over the long term that climate change faces. And in addition to that, this task force is going to be calling upon investors and banks and financial institutions to also disclose those risks. So certain governments around the world are also taking their own responsibility. Most of these tend to be European. The Swedes, the Germans, and the Swiss have all dedicated investigative commissions. What is their country's exposure to the carbon bubble within the financial community? They want to know from their banking sector, what is the risk involved for our own national economies? So these studies are being done. I'm fortunate to work for a company that's involved in some of these. Here on a domestic level, I live in the state of California. Perhaps some of you have been aware. One of the first major moves is the California Insurance Commissioner, Commissioner Jones, took a bold move in January, and he has issued 2 policy directives. California is the 6th largest insurance market in the world, and he's calling for the insurance companies to voluntarily disclose from all their investments in thermal coal. And I think most people are aware that within the thermal coal industry, that globally they've lost 86% of their market cap in, I think, a span of 18 to 24 months. So this is a very, very significant risk. So Commissioner Jones is not only asking all insurance companies to divest from thermal coal, but he's also insisting on a mandatory basis that they report on their fossil fuel economy energy investments. And I can share with you anecdotally that the insurance industry is not happy about this. And I can also share with you that he's experiencing some significant blowback from the fossil fuel industry. So let's get back into some positive news. The good news is that the investment management industry is responding. They're developing indexes. They're developing products for both institutional retail investors, and they're creating portfolios for investors that screen for companies. They want to, obviously, starting with maybe we're going to exclude fossil fuel investments, but we're going to take a deeper look at a company's approach to climate change. Do they have a board-level designation? How have they set science-based targets? Are they meeting those emissions reduction targets? Investment managers are diving deeper and deeper into forward-looking analysis, ultimately leading to a 2-degree evaluation of certain companies. And so these products are coming into the marketplace. Now, I'd like to close my presentation with what's happening on a retail level. For those of you in the room, everybody has their own investments and their own financial advisor. More and more tools are coming online that are accessible to anybody, that are essentially establishing sustainability ratings at the mutual fund and ETF product level. One of the initiatives that we're involved in is funded by the EU. It's a climate change rating system for mutual funds, similar to a Morningstar. We're leading the methodology in partnering with some research institutions from universities, and soon anybody will be able to investigate what their holdings are. And here on a domestic level in California, and I'm not sure if Andy Behar is in the room today, but I just want to call attention to, there he is. Andy, how you doing? Andy's group created a platform called fossilfreefunds.org. I encourage everybody to visit. Maybe he'll talk about it later today. So they're expanding their work in bringing more transparency into the underlying holdings of these mutual funds products and ETF products. And within a short period of time, Andy's platform and South Pole Group are going to help him launch essentially the ability for anyone in this room to basically take the step, go into your portfolio, type in the ticker, whatever identifier you want to use, and take a look into what you own. And I think that's, the part of the trend towards transparency and taking personal accountability is, a reflection of what the whole global capital markets are also doing as well. So that's kind of the super exciting developments in the in the capital markets. And obviously, as a company, we are super thrilled to be right in the very midst of all this action. I just want to thank everybody very much.